Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast. If you find today's episode hopeful and helpful, then please follow or subscribe, and then rate and review so that more people can find the conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give us a follow and turn on your notifications. Now, as a church, we just wrapped up our series called What Gives, which has been all about how we can live a more generous life. And we know that one of the most stressful things in our lives can be figuring out how we can handle money well. And last year, I had the chance to interview a finance professional, Nick Buerger, and he shared with me a lot of really helpful money advice about budgeting, saving, and talking with your spouse about money. We wanted to re-release that interview with some updated calls to action and resources to go along with it. So this is my conversation with Nick, and be sure to stick around afterwards to hear about the resources and group opportunities that you can get in the show notes. Well, hi, Nick. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, would you mind just maybe introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Nick Buerger, and I am a partner and financial planner with Forward Financial Group. We're a small independent advisory team based out of Sussex, in the Sussex area. And what I do is full comprehensive financial planning for individuals and families, just helping them navigate this crazy and complex world of retirement planning and saving for the future and walking through different things such as education planning or insurance planning, retirement planning, wealth management, even estate planning. So
Gosh, it's so interesting. I feel like everyone has, like, money is so easy to stress about, and so I'm sure you have lots of conversations with people that are like stressing over it or kind of working through those things. Is that a pretty common thing? Like, what's people's typical emotions as they're talking to you about that stuff?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's pretty much probably about 90% of the clients that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. They have different stresses about money, or is their money going to last? Do they have enough to live in the current moment? Are they going to have enough for the future? So really my job is to help navigate that with them, to build some of the confidence to hopefully be able to put their head on the pillow at night and sleep in peace and not worry about whether or not they're going to have enough.
Why do you think it's important as a follower of Jesus to like have good habits around money?
Yeah, so I mean, I've got multiple reasons that it's important, but I think number one, it eases some of your fears around the future, because I think having either not having enough or being fearful about money, I've been there myself, where you worry about it sometimes. It just kind of becomes one of those things that you want to have enough. But if you're truly following what God says, and God is the owner of our money, we're just the managers of the money. That's one of the reasons I do feel you should have good habits about it, because God wants us to be a good steward of the money that He's given us. I think it also allows us to have a more fulfilling and generous life. Like I mentioned before, if you don't have good money habits, it's hard to be generous. And there's nothing more fulfilling than being generous to others, being able to help others, being able to help your community, to help your church. I think it's also very healthy for marriages and children to see this, because it's also setting up the future of what our kids are going to do when they're the ones making the money. But for marriages too, I mean, money is probably in the top 3 or 4 reasons for the cause of divorce. And it's in the Bible. I believe it's one of the most common themes talked about in the Bible, which is talking about money, and that's just because it has such a strong hold on our hearts, because it tugs us in so many different directions. But I think it also allows us to prepare for the future. If we don't have good money habits, we don't want to wake up when we're 60 one day or 70 and wish we would have had good habits in our younger years, and feel like, hey, I got to work for another 10 years because I never had the good habits in my 30s and 40s or 50s. So yeah, I think that's some of the main reasons that I feel like the good habits would be extremely important.
Yeah, we talk about like a holistic approach to health and just like a lifestyle that comes with following Jesus. And it's easy to compartmentalize and involve Jesus in certain aspects, and kind of, I think, that holistic understanding of, well, when He's involved in your finances, that kind of frees you to be generous, to have a reduced stress, to I don't know, see God show up and do some cool stuff. So
Yeah.
I love that. Love that heartbeat.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, with that in mind, are there any like good money habits? Ooh, I don't know why that was a tongue twister for me. Are there any good money habits that you can suggest for people to start? Like anything you'd recommend right away?
Yeah, for sure. So, I would say, after God, pay yourself first. So that kind of goes back to the whole give, save, live mentality. So you should be giving because God should get our first, not our seconds. But then pay yourself first. So what I mean by that is instead of going to Starbucks for your $7 coffee every day, and instead of going to buy 8 new pairs of shoes on Amazon and scroll the internet for things that maybe you don't need, pay yourself first. So what that is maybe putting giving, obviously, and then saving. So saving, that could be into your savings account, that could be into a retirement account. That's paying yourself first, and then go ahead and start to live on the rest, which is go ahead and go to Starbucks and shop Amazon if it's all within your means, which is my second point, which you should always live within your means. So God gives us some means to provide for ourselves and our family, and it's your job to live within those means, and whatever those means are. Number three, I think you should make a budget. A budget is, it doesn't matter how much you have or how little you have, a budget is extremely important. It's just a guideline for you to follow to hold yourself accountable when, when things are maybe getting off the rails. Because if you don't have a budget, things sometimes get a little out of hand. We always have those unexpected expenses that come up, and it allows you to prepare for them, some of those things. Number four, I would say, get out of debt and stay out of debt.
Hmm.
It's one thing to maybe have a house mortgage because that's a long-term debt that is, that's not an overnight debt that we can take care of. But everything else, we shouldn't have consumer debt, which is mostly credit card debts. I understand that student loans are a big expense for a lot of people. So do your best to get out of debt and stay out of debt, because that financial freedom that gives you is going to set yourself up for the future. And then my last big point is, which I kind of alluded to before, is save for the future. Because again, you don't want to wake up in the future and wish you would have done this earlier. Compound interest is something that we don't talk about very often at church, but there's something that's called the rule of 72, which is the amount of time that it takes to double your money. So if you take a 12% interest rate, it would take you 6 years to double your money. 6 times 12 is 72. If you get an 8% interest rate on your money, it takes you 9 years to double your money. And that's without contributing anything else. So you can kind of do the math on everything else. If you get a 6% return, it takes you 12 years to double your money. But that compound interest at a younger age, the sooner you start, the more compounding it has over time. So it just allows you to let your money work harder for you so that you don't have to work as hard for your money. So that's a big tip that I have for people, is just to save for the future. So again, that you're not stuck working later when you maybe don't want to work, or you're able to take your time, talents, and treasures and put that towards something else, maybe to serve your community or serve somewhere else in your life that you wouldn't have thought otherwise if you didn't have the money.
Nick, that was so expertly, like, densely packed. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
You talk about, like, I'll pick a couple from there. One, you talk about budgeting. I was just talking with Mark White the other day, and we were chatting about how boundaries can give freedom. Boundaries give freedom, and how really budgeting is a boundary, right? You're setting yourself up, but that gives you the freedom both ways. One, to save, but also to spend. Does that ring true?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that having the budget gives you the ability to say that you can spend in certain areas that are important to you. That's why you dedicate a certain line item for those areas that are important to you. Some people, for example, really love to play golf, and golf is a pretty expensive sport if you want to do it and be decent at it.
Yeah.
I'm not that great myself. I really love playing golf, but I want to get better at it, but in order for me to get better at it, I have to put some money into, getting to the golf course a little bit more often. But if I don't have a line item in my budget to play golf, then I'm just going to find a way to spend the money in other areas because I didn't dedicate that money toward golfing. So yeah, I think it gives you the ability to spend because you've now allotted that money for a certain area of your life that's important to you.
But
Yeah.
I think that's so good because I think that the word budget is kind of like a buzzword. It's almost like the word diet, where it's like like kind of like not necessarily scary, but we have this natural like aversion to it. But it's different. I
Mhm.
think that, like you said, you budget out and you planned how you're going to spend it, and it's not all negative. It's also positive stuff. And I think
Yeah,
that's
I don't
a
think it's restrictive at all. I don't think that having a budget, if you look at the negative side, people would say, well, that's going to restrict me. That's not going to allow me to make certain decisions with my money. But if anything, it's going to free up your money. It's going to free up those opportunities to do things that you want to do. So yeah, I would agree with that.
the second thing I'll say is for people that are currently experiencing a lot of debt. I don't know what encouragement would you have for them?
I would say that debt, it's a short-term thing. It can be a short-term thing. You absolutely have to be, Dave Ramsey calls it gazelle intense. So you have to have that gazelle intensity to get out of debt. It becomes a motivation, and once you start seeing some momentum with it, the momentum builds very fast. I have seen hundreds of thousands of dollars paid off in debt from so many people, and it's not that these people are making ridiculous salaries either. They're making, a very modest middle class income, and they've just made it a motivation to get out of debt. So everybody can get out of debt.
What do you feel like people have as maybe some common misconceptions about good money habits?
I think that the top misconceptions that I see is that number one, if I make enough money, I don't need to have a budget. And again, I would say that's completely false. As I mentioned before, it really doesn't matter how much you money. Maybe you can live within your means, but are you doing the best, or are you being the steward that God wants you to be with your money? Are you allocating your money accordingly as to where, maybe it should be best spent? So one of the other areas is that I kind of alluded to saving for the future, but just that there's this mindset that I can save for retirement later. I can always wait to do this later on. And if you go back to what I was talking about with compound interest, I would argue that that's definitely a misconception that this should be taken care of now and not waiting for the future. Um, Another one is just maybe that you need more. You have to have more to be able to give. Again, I don't think that's true. I think God gives us exactly what we need, and then some. So I think again, this just kind of goes back to maybe reprioritizing some things in our life, and if you do prioritize God as a center of your life, that should become a priority within your budget. But yeah, and another one too is just maybe making more will solve your problems or make you happier. But I would argue that more money doesn't solve all your problems. It doesn't solve relational issues. It doesn't fix relational issues that you have maybe with your spouse or a friend or a family member or one of your children. It doesn't equate to more happiness. It might bring you more comfort in life. It might take away some of your fears around whether you're going to be able to provide or whether you'll have enough. But that's something that we see very often. And I've seen some of the people that have the most money who are the most miserable people. And also people that have very little that live within their means and are some of the happiest people. So I would just say that's bigger than just the amount of the amount that you take home in your paycheck.
Yeah, I think there's something to that because there's some like underlying things built in with that, right? Because what I'm hearing you say is just that if you're able to be content,
Mhm.
it's a powerful thing, right? And so you can, if
Absolutely.
you're content in your means, then you have this freedom and this like peace, really. But if you're not content, even though your means may expand, you still won't be content.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so a couple times I've heard you mention this, like the relational side of money.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about money can be really hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you break through that? Like, do you have any advice for like maybe even if it's like talking with a professional or if it's talking with your significant other? What have you seen that's helpful for people?
Yeah, I actually see that talking about money is hard for a lot of people. There's a lot, and the reason it's hard for people is because, many people are either embarrassed. They're embarrassed on the decisions that they've made in their past, or they're embarrassed. They maybe don't feel like they have enough, or they just, they're embarrassed about their whole situation, so they don't want to share it. They're fearful about money. They're fearful about their future. They're fearful about their current situation. They're fearful to open up their vulnerability about this topic and to talk to somebody about it. And sometimes they just lack knowledge or understanding, and maybe they're a little bit intimidated by it. So in some cases, especially when it comes to things like investments and planning for the future, that's an area that people are often intimidated about. So what I would recommend is find an accountability partner, find somebody that you trust first and foremost, and be willing to be a little bit vulnerable with them. And that doesn't be your spouse. I mean, your spouse is a good starting point, a great friend or somebody at the church or somebody that you feel you can be vulnerable with. And then secondly, find a professional to help. We talk about general overall health, whether that's mental health or physical health, and so sometimes people are hiring life coaches or mental health coaches or therapists to help with some of these things. And that's really what a financial professional does as well. It's just somebody helping you with those things. You should always be looking for somebody who's working in your best interest, not in the interest of themselves, which, in our industry, we call that a fiduciary. But that's something that I would strongly recommend is find somebody that you trust, whether it's through a referral or somebody that you can, sit down with and talk about this and can maybe be a financial coach for you. You just don't know where it's going to potentially change your life.
Yeah, you really have to ask yourself, like, what's the most important thing for me? Like, is it more important for me to feel comfortable in this? Is it more important for me to try to do it on my own? Or is it more important for me to, cultivate and be financially wise? And I think that there's a lot of different emotions that can go into that for a lot of different people, right? Whether it's fear, pride, or whatever. But ultimately, I think when you recognize those emotions in yourself, like having an honest conversation with yourself, you can start to kind of be like, well, should I really let my fear of this be driving me? Should I really let my pride on this issue be driving me? And if the answer is no, then ask for some help.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about it in some of our messages at the church before as well, is just that we grow better in circles than we do in rows, and just that having that community or a few people around you that are helping guide you in these areas and to hold you accountable. I do think that's extremely important, because walking life alone on a financial standpoint, it's hard, and there's so many decisions that have to be made. And sometimes it's just nice to have somebody to bounce an idea off of.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for like couples that have a hard time seeing eye to eye on money? I know it's a whole, I know it's a whole can of worms right there, but
yeah. I think again there that goes back to probably having a mediator, somebody that's an unbiased opinion, and that might be a financial professional, and maybe there's some compromise there on what type of person you're looking for. I think when you're picking somebody in the industry to help you with these things, you're looking for not only somebody who's knowledgeable about what they're talking about, somebody who has a little bit of experience, but also somebody who fits with your situation from a personality standpoint, and somebody that both the husband and the wife or whatever it may be, the partners they're looking to this person to say, hey, this is this is somebody that we both trust and we both can see eye to eye with.
Well, that was my conversation with Nick, and I want to invite anyone who's interested to join our Rock Solid Finance group, which is going to go in depth on how to do a lot of the things that Nick talked about, and you'll be able to have conversations with people wrestling with the same things that you're going through. I also want to encourage you to go to our resource page that is in the show notes to find information on how to create a budget and more resources on saving and a lot more other things. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast, and make sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors on staff at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So as a piece of that, our goal each week is to bring you something that's hopeful and helpful. So subscribe to this podcast to make sure you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations.